that's something I was curious about. Think about like, a lot of the cancers out there, colon, rectal, all this kind
Mhm.
of stuff. I was wondering, like, am I doing damage there? Is there shit happening down there from this food that is full of whatever could be in McDonald's that they get shit for? Am I doing damage where it's ending up down, like in the intestines, in the colon? What is there a possibility? Because that's not something we're tracking.
Well, you want to speak to that? Because I could
Yeah.
kind of explain things. So we have our stomach's built in three parts. We have duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum, right? So what I'd like people to think about is that the way the stomach's built, it's high acid, okay, small intestine, meaning like this is where the food and energy substrates are absorbed through the gut barrier, and then the ileum is the colon. So this is where the resistant starches, undigestible foods go. Then we get this thing called hydroosmosis at night. Water pulls into the colon through this thing called the mechanical motor complex. The system works together. The stomach grumbling and being like, oh, and then we clear. So here's the way that I look at it. First off, if you're having any heartburn, and you and I have talked about this, that if you're having any heartburn, what happens is typically this is because the duodenum or the top of the stomach is known as the funda. The funda, if it's not pressurized, what happens is that the esophagus has a thing called the esophageal sphincter, right? So this esophageal sphincter is a one-way valve. What happens is that if we are in indigestion or malabsorption or malnutrition, the funda isn't quote unquote pressurized. So think of like a motor that doesn't have enough, the springs aren't closing the valves and you're getting like leakage, if you will. So the first thing we want to do is, and I think a lot of people have indigestion because we don't eat enough salt, which is going to trip people out because salt is sodium chloride. 60% of salt is distilled into this chloride, which helps hydrochloric acid production. But I digress. So the deal is that if you're low in acid and the funda is not pressurized, this esophageal sphincter sits lightly open. So I've had heartburn my whole life up until the last like
I've
4 or 5.
also
Yeah,
from reading Chris Kresser's
yeah,
uh, literature on this, I've read that if you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, uh, they don't break down easily, and the bacteria in the stomach can cause bloating, which can cause the lower esophageal sphincter to open up, allowing
yes.
that hydrochloric acid into your esophagus. And they said even a drip of, like even the tiniest amount of that, can irritate your esophagus.
Correct. Well, so that's known as esophageal creep, or if it gets worse, it's known as GERD or
Yeah.
crest. So the thing is that so first off, I want to shout out to Chris Kresser. This was like 6 years ago where he said, we need trainers and we need people to be functional health practitioners. That dude changed my life because I realized that I have the memory and like, I have something that can do that. Like being just a trainer and strength and conditioning coach wasn't it. And that's why I almost don't even want to train people. It's just the nutrition because I could do more work with a person in 6 weeks than I could do in 6 years of training them. So thank you, Chris Kresser, for kind of giving me permission to not doubt myself and go there. Because what Chris is talking about here is, and I know he got kind of mashed on Rogan, but I have to say that guy's been one of the most profound assets as far as information and dissemination of positive wellness that's out there. So, thank you, Chris. But back to you, Eddie. So what's happening is when nutrition partitioning breaks down, we are in maldigestion. So what happens is we get a thing called the trot. So we go back to that Bristol scale. So as Mike said, we go down to that number 6 or number 7. Those, when we're in that space, that means digestion's too fast. So the Bristol scale by number actually represents a kind of almost a chronology of speed,
Wait.
a
For
tempo.
for those people that are like me, uh, like 7, 8 is like diarrhea,
Correct. Yeah. Or the trot.
and
So
then
trots.
one's like you got a softball stuck in your stomach that
Yeah.
won't
So,
come
so
out.
one is, so I work with menopausal women and something that they have is like, it's really gnarly. It's like, they don't get constipated, but it's typical for women who are in menopausal straits. Yeah, there it is. is is that they will poop like super hard rocks. So on the rectum and stuff, they'll get fissures and stuff. And mom and the abuelas, they don't like to talk about stuff like that, but it's really, really unfortunate. And I will say this: a simple dose of 300 grams of magnesium biglycinate or glycinate at night will really, really support better digestion and actually works as a stool softener. But back to you, Eddie, and what Chris Kresser was saying. So something that's misunderstood and something I really appreciate about Chris is because we need and want to speak about the maturation or matriculation of our bodies as they get older. So the deal is that we have three enzymes: amylase, protease, and lipase. Okay, amylase, which is responsible for breaking down carbohydrate, it gets diminished. So that's why we have buddies who, like, you know, at
Ah,
35, 36 become like, they go from being like the good guy who could drink to becoming like, bro, I'm so wrecked, I'm so effed up. I talked to your wife about this, and I warned her. I said, she's like, why do I drink and feel like so much more, you know, like crap than I used to? So, for instance, with your wife, when I use that is like the kind of like the hallmark of her amylase, and said, well, look, let's have your glasses of wine, but they have to be of dry wine variant, European variant, low in sugar, low in phthalates. But let's go ahead and look at your carbohydrate intake first. And I said, let's go ahead and back that off, and let's not restrict but replace. And then we went and looked at the wines, and her results immediately changed, because if the body can't digest foods, or it's quote unquote what I call like confused, this is where a lot of, like, you know, the body is like Scrooge McDuck. It doesn't want to waste anything. So what happens is when our nutrition partitioning is breaking down, like the body's going to store, you know, and then there's this thing called the oxidative process. There's a bunch of different variants to it, or variables rather, but it's absolutely right. You know, like, people don't understand that we have systemically changed. We're different. I mean, you're 50, I'm 50. Mike, how? I mean, with that hair, you look 80, but God knows you're probably like 30.
Rumpelstiltskin over there.
Yeah, straight
Yeah.
up. But I don't want to filibuster the podcast, man. But basically, you know, there's a number, the variables that come into this. You know, we want to be binary and go, well, it's calorie in, calorie out. Look, the Atkins, you know, method for kilometrometry, whatever, like, it's a unit of heat. So the way that the body, a calorie in is not a calorie metabolized. And so for, you know, it's kind of interesting, because what you did here, you know, what you guys did is, it kind of, if it fits your macros, but then you brought me in as kind of the boffin or the geek and said, no, 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 we're not doing that, but we're going to do it. We are going to do that, but it's going to be very, like, more clean. You know, it's like, instead of just throwing a pile of books on the ground, I kind of separated them a little, and tried to keep it super, super easy. So what you did, Eddie, is like, it was really cool, man. I'm going to not this. I tell people this and they're all incredulous. I mean, it's like, the day,
It's
like,
been easy to stay in the same kind of realm now, where I'm staying high protein, good fats, and I take a supplement now every one. Like
yep,
when I feel like I can't get near my protein that I need, I take amino acids, and
love it. Yep.
yeah, and I have two different ones. I take the Perform and the Heal, and I think that makes a huge difference now too, because before I had thousands of McDonald's burgers in my kitchen waiting for me at all times, and you know that I would just heat up in the microwave. And now it's like, oh, what am I going to do? I can't cook up a burger right now, like a grass-fed burger that I just, you know, mix up my amino acids.
Can we speak about the amino acid thing here? Because
Yeah.
in the past, like when I've been on other podcasts, we talked about, you know, branched chain amino acids and how they were relevant. They've even been sponsored, and you could see me sit in the corner, and I'm like, like, and here's the deal: branched chain amino acids are excellent. In the research and literature, we know for people who are like, you know, later geriatric, they actually are of benefit. The deal is, though, is that in order for us to invoke this thing called muscle protein synthesis, we need a certain bolus. Again, bolus means like a medical nutritional amount of something. So the deal is that the amino acid that's responsible for this is known as leucine. And in leucine, I
Mhm.
believe, you know, if my memory's serving me right, we want about 8 grams a day. So between food and these things, if we get 8 grams a day, we will get into this muscle protein synthesis. Again, dependent on the individual. Branched chain amino acids, or let me slow down. All branched chain amino acids, whey protein, whole food matrix. What happens? Each one of these provide an array. Okay, so bodybuilders, they eat every 2 hours. And people go, well, they do that. They need the calories. No, false. Excuse me, false. The deal is now looking at it and realize, and whether they know it or not, every 2 hours they're getting a bolus of protein through typically whole foods, being lean meats. So if you eat a steak, you get an array, a protein array that's about 2.5 hours. If you use branched chain amino acids, it's like 15 minutes. So if you don't have this array that goes over a certain amount of time, it doesn't create this quote unquote stimulus. And by the way, the reason, or the thing that really got me captivated in this, was infants. Like infants' metabolism of protein, infants' metabolism of carbohydrate. So their bodies are primed. You know, I look at the chonk, you know, Eddie's got, you know, both of you guys have beautiful kids. It's like, but how is it that the chonk is putting on massive amounts of muscle and he's losing fat? Well, the body is actually primed in a certain way to like hyper absorb carbohydrate. And then also the body's really in a state to really, it's almost like,
Can
it's weird.
can
It's
I
just the body's
can
hyper
I
designed for this.